Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man walahu wa ba'd. So today we're going to talk about calculation. Then I'm going to share some information with you that you all submitted. What I tried to do is take all of your submissions for your Zakat information and find those who submitted information completely, sometimes in excess of what was necessary, and then boil it down to a couple of kind of typical situations that you would find when calculating your zakat. So before we jump into that, let's talk about the two terms that we began with, which was Hawl and Nisab. Hawl, we said, is the zakat year. It is essentially the lunar year. Now, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, it's narrated from him, La zakata hatta yahulu alayhi al-hawl. There's no zakat until a complete hawl, a complete year, has passed on that wealth. This is narrated from Abdullah ibn Umar. It's a point of ijma' between all scholars, and we find this applied to most types of wealth. As we said, there are different types of asset classes, and different asset classes are treated differently. And I think that will become very clear when we go through these spreadsheets together. The other is Nisab. And Nisab is essentially the minimum liability amount, which I called in my book MLA. I think just saying Nisab is sufficient. Not everyone is liable for zakat. You may have wealth, but that wealth might not reach the limit to make you liable. Just like, for example, everyone has to pay taxes, but you don't actually pay taxes until you've earned a certain amount of money. In zakat, it's very similar. Everyone is obligated to fulfill the pillar of Islam known as zakat. But the way that they fulfill that's depending upon the amount of wealth that they have accumulated, that they have reasonably, easily accessible, ready for growth, unencumbered by debt, so on and so forth. So this brings up a very important point that people ask year in and year out. And we covered it, I believe, in session 2 and 3. And that is the idea of, well, what do I pay on? If I have Nisab, do I only pay on Nisab and I don't pay on anything more than that? Or if I have Nisab, do I pay on everything above Nisab and nothing below that? Or do I pay on the entirety? And the answer is that you pay on the entirety. Now, if you're wondering, if you're interested in how to calculate the Nisab, I want to show you this page on my website. And if you look on my website, if you go to joebradford.net/Nisab, you will see this simple calculator. This simple calculator essentially gives an explanation for how the Nisab is calculated. So I essentially took the fatwa of Mufti Shafi of Deoband on what number of grams of gold and silver there are. And then for the Shafi'iyya, Hanabila, Malikiyya, I went to the Dar al-Ifta of Al-Azhar, of Jordan, of Malaysia, of Morocco, and of Saudi Arabia. IOFI agrees with that as well. So essentially just touch this drop down here, choose the madhab, and it will automatically calculate based on the London Bullion Market Association prices for gold and silver. So it's automatic. So if we go here to IOFI, the silver Nisab is $514.08. If you have had $514.18 in savings or more throughout the entire year, then you owe zakat. On what? On the entirety. Let's say, for example, you've had $600 in savings. You are a 14-year-old kid. You live at home with your mom and dad. You have no expenses. All you have is your cash savings from odd jobs and gifts and idea and stuff like that that you get. You have $600. Do you have to pay zakat? Yes, you do. How much zakat do you pay? You take your $600 and then you multiply it by 2.5%, and your zakat for that year is $15. Very simple. You are not going to pay only on 514 to the exclusion of the other $65. You're not going to pay on only the $65 to the exclusion of the 514. You're going to pay on the total amount in your possession. And that's the idea of paying zakah and using the Nisab. Now, one thing that comes up every year is in some months, I might earn a lot of money. In other months, I might earn a little bit. I might start earning from Ramadan of this year until the Hijjah, and I've earned for 3 months, and then I stop earning from that source and I earn from another source. And so I've got all these different sources of wealth, which technically would all have their own zakat year, but are from the same genus and comparable sources. So let's say, for example, I own a flock of sheep, and that's growing on its own. It's grazing, feeding, having babies, growing on its own. That can have a separate year than my gold, because my gold just sits in my safe at home, doesn't do anything. That may have a separate year from my business inventory, because my business inventory is a partnership and it's tagged with other people. So I have to share with other people. So you can have these different streams. However, there is agreement among scholars that everything that is valuated in gold and silver essentially is going to be added together. So my business inventory, I would get the valuation of it from my business, but I would just add that value to my gold and silver, to my cash, to my crypto, to my rental income, so on and so forth. So the only time you want to separate the zakat year is when there is a meaningful separation. As the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يجمع بين متفرق ولا يفرق بين مجتمع خشية الصدقة. You should not conjoin separate forms of wealth, nor separate conjoined forms of wealth out of fear or in attempt to evade zakat. So what does this mean? Let's say, for example, I make, let's just say, $3,000 a month, okay? And I've got my my calculator out here, just so you know. So that means I make $36,000 a year. But let's say, for example, I'm in Ramadan, I totaled my car, and now I have an insurance payout coming for the value of that car. The source of that money from the insurance payout is completely different than the source of my regular income. So it is acceptable to treat it as a separate source, meaning that that money is coming in so that I can buy that car, and it's not something that I've earned from my salary or my pay. It's simply something that came in as an insurance payout. It would be reasonable to treat that separately. But if I get a bonus from work, then that's the same source and type of money that I'm getting from my salary, and therefore I include it. What am I getting at here? What I'm getting at here is that throughout the year, you will have varying amounts of expenses, income, bonuses, rewards, gains, all of that. If you were to try to follow each and every stream of income with its own zakat year and its own expenses and bifurcate all of those expenses from each other, you would probably go crazy. It would be an extremely daunting task, unless, of course, I said that those divisions are made by contract or by law, right? Such as that source of income coming from the insurance payout, or my business is separate from my personal finance, for example. So what do you do in that case? In that case, do not only look at the cumulative amount of money that you have throughout the year, right? Take a snapshot of one day out of the year. Choose when you're going to pay your zakat. And then take a snapshot on that day of all of your assets and of all of your expenses that are immediately due, not long-term debts that are unpaid, but immediately due. And then include those, add them all up, and then calculate that by 2.5%. Now, let me just get a little more comfortable. Now, one thing that we want to be careful of is not including or excluding things in an attempt to feed the stinginess of our souls instead of fulfilling our duty to Allah. And I think being live and behind a camera, it is easier to express my frustration, because if I do this live in front of people, I feel that sometimes it would be rude. But I have taught this topic for the past, since 2007, every year, nearly every year, I should say. And it never fails to surprise me that people who are generally giving and dedicated and want to give their zakah, the moment it comes to calculating and including assets or including expenses, they get extremely flustered. And they start to hesitate about being generous and gracious. And I don't mean that they are hesitant to give more zakat than they have to. But my experience has been is that people look for ways out based on how they feel about something or their personal plans, not based upon what Allah and His Messenger have commanded. And I'm a human being. I'm guilty of. So I think it's important that, if I had the ability to with a camera, I would have done it for you all. But I like to take a banana. Okay, chop the banana up into 10 pieces. Take one piece of that banana, chop it in 4 pieces. Take 1/4 and give it to someone. And then ask them, do you feel that you've taken something of great value from me? Or do you feel that you've disenfranchised me? No. That's the amount of your zakah. Zakah, 2.5%, comes from the hadith, that there is 1/4 of 1/10 due for zakah. So 1/4 of 1/10 equals 2.5%. You can also get the same by divided by 40. The point being is that we many times, people say, but I've been saving for a house. Okay, you've been saving for a house. So what? You've also been spending from the same money. But when it comes time to pay for zakat, you suddenly need to find a fatwa. You didn't have a fatwa when you were renting, a movie or going out to eat. But now you have a fatwa because you have to give charity, or you need one. This is problematic. This is one of the things that we really have to look deep down into our hearts about. And remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will not reach the pinnacle of piety until you give from that which you love. So when we're talking about the nisab, what you want to do is you want to take the amount of nisab, and we said before that the approximations for the weights of gold and silver, dirhams and dananir, or darahim wa dananir, were, and I believe this is in the very first lecture we talked about jewelry. Those were approximated by scholars. Majority has now settled on 85 grams of gold as the nisab and 595 grams of silver as the nisab. Which of these two amounts do you take? Maybe we can go back to this screen. You can see the amounts that are here. Okay. So when you see these amounts here, you've got, we can recalculate, right? So you've got Hanafis at 87.48 and 612.36, and the Shafi'iyya Malikiyya Hanabila at 85 grams of gold and 595 grams of silver. Take the daily prices, multiply them by those number of grams. That gives you the nisab for the day. Okay, and these are grabbing live prices. You might say, I checked it at the beginning of the day, and then I checked it at the end of the day. Which one do I use? Use the one that you pulled when you calculated. Now, these amounts, as we said, they set the minimum amount. So we'll take the price of grams per silver multiplied by 595. That gives us a nisab. As we said, it was 515 or something like that. And then we look at our total assets. Has it been more than that for more than a year? For most of us, it has been. And therefore, we'll pay zakat on that amount. Now, which of them do we use? Do we use gold or silver? We use silver. And the reason being is that silver was the most common form of currency during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Number two, silver is the most commonly mentioned currency in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. In fact, there's only one hadith that mentions gold. That is in Abu Dawud, and there is considerable discussion about its authenticity. But is gold liable for zakat? Absolutely. There are numerous ahadith about it. We're not talking about liability here. We're talking about what is the basis for calculating value. Additionally, if we look through all of the different types of zakat that is paid, zakat on precious metals, zakat on dates, zakat on camels, on sheep, on cows, and we look at the normative values that are found in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, we'll find that they essentially kind of go back to being equal to the nisab of silver. Also, with the nisab being lower, okay, so when we looked at the nisab last time, it was what? $6,256 for gold, $513 for silver. Will more people pay zakat with the nisab of silver or with the nisab of gold? More people will pay with the nisab of silver. Therefore, we use that. Why? لأنه هو الأصلح للفقراء. It is what is better, more beneficial to the needy, the indigent, those in need. And that is the whole purpose of zakat, is to benefit those who are in need. So therefore, we use silver. Now, somebody could say, well, what if one day silver is more expensive than gold? And we would say use gold, because that would be what is most effective and beneficial to the needy. Okay. Now, one thing that we want to do is take a look at some examples of, excuse me, of paying zakah. And today we're going to go over about 4 examples. Okay, I'm just shutting down a number of applications on my computer, which I should have done earlier, but okay, so we're gonna share, and I'm gonna share with you this window, and these are zakat calculations. Okay, so I've got 4 people up today, and let me see if I can maybe make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so it's easier to see. Oh, that was the wrong thing to do. Well, I wanted to go to full screen, but I guess that doesn't do it. Okay, so I hope that you were talking. Please put your questions in, and I'll go back and I will go back and answer your questions, just so you realize that. Okay, so please submit your questions in the comments. I will be answering the questions when we get to the end of these things, and I'll take a peek in after every persona that we finish, or every profile, and then answer those questions. Okay, so here we're looking at an employee with the initial ZM. He's a mid-career employee. He doesn't have lots of savings, but he does have some. And I think the reason for that is he's working in a career where he has a pension. That pension, for the most part, is going to, take care of him in his old age. So he has $13,000 of cash. Notice that the liability percentage is 100%, because cash is all, you always pay 100% on cash. He has 6,000 worth of gold. Gold, you always pay the same as cash, 100%. He has 30,000 of cryptocurrency. Yes, a lot of you will say to me, but I'm invested in my cryptocurrency. No, you are holding your cryptocurrency for the long term. Even if you tried to say that they were digital assets and not currency, you would still have to pay zakat on assets. So the 30,000 here would also be liable for 100%. Now, is there any exception to this? If you're in the crypto space and you know what an LP token is, then if you own LP tokens, then it would be different than owning the coins, owning the regular tokens. But if you are not, and most people are simply just holding, you will pay on the total amount that you are holding. So he has grand total of assets of 49,000 pounds. As you can see, this is someone from the UK, and he has a home, but he's going to pay 0 on that home. Why? Because we said that homes are exempted from zakat. Okay. Now, there's one thing here that I actually forgot to add. Notice that he said he has an annual profit of $25,000. Okay. So I didn't put that there. Let's go and put that in. Okay. And then change this to 100% because it's cash. And then that would change his grand total of assets to $74,000. Now you might say, well, maybe he's spending from that cash and he doesn't have the total. So we're going to make the assumption that he has $25,000 total in cash. What if he is making that money and spending it every month? In that case, we would go up here and we would adjust our 25,000 divided by 12. And that means he's bringing in about 2,083 a month. And then we're going to add the current month to his assets. Why? Because the savings that he has left over would be reflected in his cash. So if I can stress one thing, it is to get on top of understanding how to budget. Start understanding what you need to know in order to budget properly for the wealth that you have. Because if you don't, it will be that much more confusing when you try to calculate your zakat. Notice somebody says, no, he has 25,000. He might have 25,000. Again, I'm going off of only the information that he left me in the notes. He might have 25,000 pounds total, but he might also have 25,000 that he earns throughout the year, being the equivalent of 2,083 every month. And then he spends from that on his needs. So his salary and his expenses are eating through any cash that he has. So he's only going to pay on what is currently earned and what has been saved. Now you might say, well, isn't he paying on some things that are on time and other things that he hasn't had for a whole year? Yes, but we also said that any type of wealth that's earned from the same type and the same source is simply added to what was there before. So even if you get a bonus, you get a salary, or you make money from those sources, you simply add it to what you have. That's different than having a completely separate form of wealth that grows on its own. So we took his 40K of annual expenses, divided them up monthly, and deducted that from the total amount of wealth that he has, which is 51,083. We deducted 3,333, and that gave us 47,750. And then notice down here, we used two calculations, 2.5% and 2.578%. If you pay zakat on the Hijri calendar, the Islamic calendar, then you will use 2.5%. If you pay using the Gregorian calendar, which is not preferred, but is permissible at times, then you pay 2.578%. Why do you do that? To make up for the difference of 11 days that are found between the Hijri calendar and the Gregorian calendar. Now, one thing that people will often ask is, if I'm supposed to simply choose a day throughout the year, when do I choose it? There are three opinions or three positions that were narrated from the Salaf. One is that they would pay their zakah in Muharram. And the reason why they would pay their zakat in Muharram would be to give people the ability to collect their need. That it would give the poor the ability to collect enough zakat to suffice their needs for the year. And so you could be part of that in Muharram. Also, the first 10 days of Muharram have special blessings to them. The second time is in Sha'ban, the month before Ramadan. Why? Because many of them wanted to pay their zakah first, and then all of their charity in Ramadan to be considered extra, and thus help make up for any deficiencies in that obligation that they have already met before the time of Ramadan. So not only are you giving sadaqah to make up the gap, but you're also multiplying that from 10 to 700%. So therefore, you definitely be gaining lots of reward. Others chose Ramadan. And they chose Ramadan because of the statement of Uthman, هذا شهر زكاتكم فاقضوا ما عليكم من ديون ثم أدوا زكاة أموالكم أو كما روي عنه. This is the month of your zakah, so pay the debts that are upon you and then pay the zakah of your wealth. That's narrated by Imam Malik in the Muwatta. The idea of Sha'ban is narrated in the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shaybah, and the idea of Muharram is mentioned by Ibn Rajab in لطائف المعارف بما في السنة من وظائف. I think that's the whole title. So it's the subtlety of knowledge, of the subtlety of knowings about the different wazifa. Some of you are familiar with the term wazifa, of what, the different actions one does throughout the year. So essentially, it's a book that Ibn Rajab wrote per the Islamic calendar, and then he talks about all of the different bounties and fada'il and virtues and historical events that happen in every month, and some of the ahkam that are related to them. Which of these three opinions is right? All of them. It's completely up to you. The important thing is choose a day and stick to it. Okay. Let's go here. I'm actually going to delete this. Okay. Let's go here and look at this person, N.A. He is a corporate expat. Okay, so he's working for a corporation as an expat. He's working out of the country. When we look at his cash, he has $35,000. That is going to be 100%. Miscellaneous, he has a refundable deposit of so that's going to be included 100% because he can collect on it. He doesn't have gold. He doesn't have silver. He has $20,000 in cryptocurrency. So those held between Robinhood and Coinbase. And so he would use today's value. So if today's value is 20,000, then add 20,000. If today's value is 18,000, add 18,000. If today's value is 25,000, add 25,000. He has a pension from his company. He does not have a 401k or a traditional IRA or a 403b or any kind of defined benefits program, but he has a retirement plan from his company that the company puts money into and is not accessible to him until he retires. What does that mean? It means it's not his money by near or by far. He's not responsible for it until he actually receives it. And he receives it one of two ways: lump sum at retirement or access to the account at retirement. So that 100,000 notice is at 0%. So it does not show up in his zakat liability. He has a $30,000 contribution to a Roth IRA. A Roth IRA is a independent retirement account that you manage on your own, that you contribute money to, and you are precluded from benefiting from the gains on that. So you have two things: contributions and gains. And you can go back to the video about retirement accounts for more on this. The contributions you can pull out at any time, just like you can take cash out of your bank account. The gains you cannot touch until you retire. Therefore, you would, let's say, for example, his account total is 45, his contributions are 30, then he's going to include 30 over here on what he's doing. Now, let's say that $30,000 was cash. Then he would simply put 100. But it's not cash. It's in long-term investments that are growing. And we said if you invest in a company, that company is going to have both current and non-current assets, both soft and hard assets. You're only going to consider the current assets, which are cash, receivables, and inventory. And the rule of thumb is to use 30%. Now, some companies have current assets of much higher. Some companies have current assets of much lower. The 30% rule was created by me for the purpose of averaging out what most companies have of current assets and adding a buffer for differences, for fluctuations. So some companies will have very few current assets, maybe 2 to 5%. Others will have 40%. So the 30% is an average to keep you on the safe side. Now, if you want to, you can certainly go to zoya.finance/zakat and use the zakat calculator there and get all of the current assets for your funds and your stocks. And that is a great resource that the guys at Zoya put together. And, we worked with them on, myself and Sheikh Omar Khan and Bilal and Saad. We all worked on, they did the work. We talked about it, and they did a really great service for creating that. And the great thing about it too is that it has extremely current data, right? So if you want to use that, you want to kind of comb through that with a fine-tooth comb, you can do that. Else you can just use 30% rule. Now notice that this person does not have a 401k or traditional IRA, so therefore there's zero that we need to worry about there. They do have an education savings account, an ESA, for their child. Education savings account is accessible. You can spend from it, and therefore because it's a long-term investment, we're using the 30% rule here, and that gives us $13,500. Now, here's an interesting situation. They have 3 properties, okay? Actually, 5 properties, but 3 rental and 2 long-term. The 3 rentals essentially are $175,000, $200,000, $220,000 in value. And they generate 1% of their value in rental income. The rental income here pays the mortgage of the family home, which is this one, and rental property number 2. The rental income here is actually less than the mortgage and the tax liabilities. And then the rental income here is higher than the mortgage and the tax liabilities. Now, I did reach out to this person to get more information, but this is what we're going to do in this situation. Because this money is flowing into the bank account every month, we're going to take the monthly amount earned, which means that even though there are deductions based on the mortgage mentioned, that's going to be mentioned where? It's going to be mentioned way down here. So we're going to add anything that comes in as a positive, and then we'll back out anything that comes from a negative later on. So because these amounts are coming in every month, we are going to treat them as monthly income. Where would they go if they're not spent? Well, as he said here, the mortgage is less than the mortgage and the taxes income, $2,000, meaning that maybe there's $200-300 left over. That's going back into cash. So that's going to show up here. So remember to always think about where your money is ending up after you spend it. Don't think to yourself, well, I shouldn't include it at all because it's a wash and it's completely wiped out. It may not be completely wiped out because you might have cascading amounts like this where there is some left over that goes into cash. So include them, and then they're going to be backed out because you're going to be paying those expenses out of pocket anyway. The next 2 properties are undeveloped land. So you just bought land and you're just sitting on it. And in essence, that is where the issue of illiquid assets come up. That land is not generating wealth, nor can it be valuated until the time of sale. So you have a bill of sale in hand and you've been paid. In that case, what do? You pay 2.5% of the sales price without deducting any expenses, regardless of how long you hold it. The family home, there's no zakat due because it is a personal asset. Similarly, is this $10,000 investment in a startup. So maybe this was like an angel investment, VC funding, something like that. So he put $10,000 into a company. That company is now operating. They do not know if or when they will be profitable at all. They don't have financials to show because they don't disclose financials in startups because they're protecting their secret sauce. And therefore, there is nothing that one can base the valuation off of. Therefore, you wait till one of 2 things. You wait until a conversion event, which is where your angel investment or your or pre-seed startup investment will be converted to shares, and then now you have knowledge about what it's worth. Or there's a liquidation event where they're selling to another company, and you're going to be paid out for the percentage that you own. So in that case, it is also an illiquid asset because the value is not known and there is no market for it until the time of sale. What if you sold back to the startup itself? In that case, you would then pay 2.5% on whatever you receive from the startup, even if it's before the liquidation event or IPO. Okay. Now, here is an interesting point. I actually wrote to him asking him a little bit about this. So there are loans, and these were kind of, the non-delinquent loans he had included with cash up there. There was nothing there. Working capital loans. So these are working capital loans, money that he has put out into other people's companies to work. Now, there are two questions about including these or not. Number one, are these callable or non-callable loans? What is the difference between the two? A callable loan means that if I say, hey, Abdullah, I'm going to give you $1,000. Anytime I call you and tell you you have to send it back to me, then you have to send it back to me. That's permissible. There's no problem to have a callable loan. Obviously, you would have to deal with delinquency or inability to pay if that existed at that time. But if it's callable and you can collect on it, then most likely you're going to include it. Why? Because it's essentially at will for you to be able to recoup that money. Additionally, is there any interest earned on these loans? If it is, it's haram. And that interest needs to be given away in its entirety to charity. So for the sake of, the smoothness of what we're calculating, we're just going to assume that these are callable loans that can be collected at any time, and we're going to include them in the grand total of assets, which is $85,450. And then we will look to our expenses. Now, he has two types of expenses. Number one is he has a IRS tax payment of $5,000, and that's for Q4 of last year, Q1 of this year. So the IRS in the United States mandates that if you're working contract work as a self-employed, you're self-employed, you are going to pay the IRS every quarter from your estimated earnings. And then you square up later on to make sure that the earnings were accurate at the end of the year, and you'll either pay overages or underages. But it is something that is a debt that could land him in legal problems, and therefore it must be paid, even if it's an estimate, and can be deducted from Zakat this time. You might say, well, what about the money that if he makes it later on? It's going to come back into cash, and it's going to be added to next year's Zakat. Also, he has his credit card bill and current monthly expenses of $7,000. Now, it's apparent that he's just spending all from the credit card and then paying it off from his cash whenever he gets paid every month. And that's, that's reasonable. Now, did you note the problem here? The problem is that we didn't have a grand total of liabilities that added both of those together. So we have to add them. So we have $12,000. So we have $12,000 in liabilities that are due right now in April, right? And we have $85,450 of total assets. And what that means is we have a grand total of Zakat liable wealth of $73,450. And if we were to calculate that by 2.5%, then we would be paying $1,836.25, or $1,893 if you are using the Gregorian calendar. Now, one thing that he did, and he sent me, I really liked, was He planned out his last 10 nights and he was giving out his zakat throughout the last 10 nights. So you can see like 500, 300, 500, 350, 300, 350, 250, 500, 500. So all of these different causes that, of course, are going to be, you have to make sure that these are all zakat eligible. This gave us, that totals by the end of the month, that would be $3,550. That means that if his zakah was $5,000, he would have a balance of $2,000 to pay in addition to meet his zakat liability. But here he's actually paid. By the end of Ramadan, he'll have given $1,714 over his zakat, which will be then counted for him as sadaqah. So those are two cases so far. Let's make sure that we've got no questions that have come in. Okay. Looks like this is sticking. Okay. Someone asked, I have a home down payment coming up in next 2 weeks. I had that money for over a year. Do I have to pay zakat on it? Yes, you do. You have to pay zakat on it because it's cash and it is sitting with you for more than a year. Iman asks, do you pay zakat on a diamond? And if so, what is the nisab? You do not pay zakat on diamonds unless you are using those diamonds as stores of value. If you bought those diamonds as investments, I hate to say it, it's a bad investment because the price is extremely subjective. But if you did, then yes, you would simply get the value of that and pay on it. Else, if it's a diamond that's in your ring or a diamond that's, in jewelry, then those are not, you do not pay on zakat on those. So it's only if you have a specific intention of buying it for a store of value. For students who receive FAFSA grants and scholarship, is this money subject to zakat? No, it's not. Why? Because when you receive it, you're receiving it, and that's when you start zakat. That's when you start your zakat year. So if I receive, let's say $5,000 of FAFSA, and then I go and I pay my semester bills, and it's $4,000, and I've got $1,000 left over, I'm going to spend that $1,000 throughout the year. If any of that $1,000 is left over, I add it to my savings. That portion would be part of your zakat, but the totality of your FAFSA grants and scholarships would not be. So Rocco says, this is helpful. Can we get more examples like this in the future? Yes. So, there's a couple of more examples that everyone has submitted. So today we're just going over these 4. And then, today's Thursday. So next week, inshallah, we will wrap up with, maybe on Tuesday, we will wrap up with Zakat al-Fitr. And we will wrap up with, so Zakat al-Fitr would be a bonus round because I don't actually have Zakat al-Fitr in the book, but we'll do something about Zakat al-Fitr, and we'll do a couple more examples of this. And yes, Tabish, Zakat guide 1 through 8 is all on YouTube. Everything that we're streaming to all different services, but everything is saved on YouTube. Okay, so we've done this one, and we've done this one, and we've done, have we done this one? We've only done the 2. So let's do the last 2. Okay. Here's another person who is a contract employee and an entrepreneur. And mashallah, doing well for himself. So he has $10,000 in cash. This is found in his credit union savings account. He has $30,000 worth of gold. He has not sure why that's copied there. No crypto. Okay, so no, it says $30,000 jewelry, and no silver, no gold. Okay, and then you can actually just put a 0 there. He has no pension. He has a Roth IRA with $50K in equities that he's holding for the long term. So what are we going to do because of that? We're going to, number one, ask, is that $500K contributions or growth? I'm going to guess that that $500K is actually not all contributions. Why would I say that? Because the average amount for contributing to a Roth IRA has been about $6,000 to $6,500 for the past 5 to 6 years. I believe it's gone up to 65 or 6,500 or 7,000 this year. That means he would have been contributing to his Roth IRA for the past 76 years. And I'm just guessing that a guy who's on social media and submitted a Google form has not been contributing to his Roth IRA for, has not been contributing to his Roth IRA for 76 years. So I'm going to guess that the entirety of this 500,000 is, if we were to just take, let's just say, an average of, even if we just gave him 20 years and an average of $6,500 every year, and this is not exact, that means that his contributions were more along the lines of $130,000. Okay. And what that means is that if that's a long-term hold, then he's going to be paying 30% of that amount. So the are accessible. And because they are long-term, holding both current assets and hard assets, capital assets, then we're only going to pay on the current assets, and we're going to use the rule of thumb of 30,000. Traditional IRA, the same thing, right? So I'm actually thinking that this person's probably married and their spouse has been contributing as well. And so I would gander that maybe this would be $150,000 of contributions, and then this would be 30% as well. The 401k, because he does not have access to it, will not pay anything on it until cash is either drawn out in lifetime or reach the retirement age and pulls out all of that money. An ESA is an educational savings account, and that is, again, follows the 30% rule because it is a long-term passive investment for the education of the children. And then his brokerage account. And his brokerage account is also intended to be for long-term, not for trade. And he has an average holding time of 3 to 5 years, and it's $1 million in value. So we will also treat that according to the 30% rule. Where is the tax advantage? Why are we not treating it like the 401k? Because we can access it completely. Why are we using the 30% rule? Because it's a long-term investment. What will he do for taxes? Well, he won't pay taxes on that money until he gets capital gains. You never get capital gains until you sell. Therefore, we'll use the 30% rule in evaluating that. Now, with rental real estate, okay, he said he only gave me the amount that the house was valued at. So I put the value of the rent every month at 1% of the total value. Okay. And so we'll add that $3,850 to the total assets as they come in. This is giving us, notice, this is giving us another line here that we need to square up. Businesses or startups. He has a service business, which generates about 40K in revenue. So we're going to put 40K in here. Okay. And we're going to put 100 because that is cash that's coming through. But there is also 5K in expenses. So we go negative sign, 5K, and that 100% of that is deductible. And then pull that down. And then we say C line 23. I'm sorry, C line 21. Okay. And therefore, we update our expenses and we get a total of $11,666.67, which is deducted from our nearly $500,000 in grand total assets, which gives us zakat liable wealth of $486,183.33. And that means your zakat is $12,154.58. All right. So this is, I'm going to say, kind of out of the ballpark for most people, right? But mashallah, this person is doing very well for themselves. Now, the last person that we're going to talk about is an employee who is just starting out in a corporate job, consulting, engineering, whatever. So she has $300 in cash, and she has $83,858 in her checking account. For silver, she owns a 1 kilogram bar of silver, which at 87 cents for 1,000 grams, that comes up to $870. Okay, so notice that she bought it for $817. It is now worth $870. She has a 401k that has a value of $19,781, but she cannot access that. So we're going to keep that at 0%. And then she doesn't have any real estate and all of that. And she has $4,000 monthly of expenses. Now that means that she's going to have a grand total of zakat liable wealth of $81,028.38, making her zakat this year of $2,025. Now, one thing that I would like to reiterate is that it is extremely important to go back here and take a look at this cash, okay? This cash here should be invested somewhere. What would I do if I had this amount of cash? Okay, if I had this amount of cash, I would take it and I would immediately go, and before April 14th, I would put $65,000 for $6,500 for 2023 plus $6,500 for 2024 into my Roth IRA. This is obviously after I paid my zakat. Why can I do that? Because for Roth IRAs, you are allowed to contribute to the Roth IRA the entire calendar year plus 4 months. So if I didn't contribute anything for 2023 and I have extra money at the end of the year and it's January now, no problem. I can contribute for last year, then I can contribute for this year. So I would immediately move money into the Roth IRA in order to do that. Then I would establish a brokerage account, okay? And I would take, so, you know, if I had this, now I'm going to okay, so I'm going to add this, my Roth IRA, that's going to give me, you know, 13,000 in my Roth IRA. Okay. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to put, you know, if my living expenses are 4,000, okay? So 4K times 6 months equals what? $24,000, right? So I want to have $24,000 in here, right? And I want to put the rest somewhere else. So that means that I'm going to go and I'm going to take my 70,585.38 minus $24,000, and I'm going to put 46,858.38 into a brokerage account, and I'm going to have it start working for me, right? And what that means is that I will take this and I will deduct this amount, and therefore my zakat liability would be different, right? But I now have money which is working for me. Why did my liability go down? Because now I have this sitting there for the long term, not getting eaten away by inflation and expenses, working for me. So the part that's still cash, which is the 30%, I'm still going to pay on that, right? My expenses didn't change that much, and I also still have 6 months of living expenses that are in savings. Okay, so let's make sure that we are including everything there. Yep, that is D4. Okay, 23. Now we've got that. And then that would bring us down to $880.69 for our zakat. But I'm saying that's for the year going forward. For what our year now, we can't go and do all of that last minute just to be able to get out of zakat. But for going forward, if you are in your 20s, like this person is, then you need to have as much money working for you now. I think it's like some quick back of the napkin math is like if you are saving $100 from the time you started work at 22, 23 until the time that you retired. No, I'm sorry, until for 10 years, you would have like $1 million when you retire, even if you never put anything on beyond those 10 years. But if you didn't do anything for those 10 years and then you tried to start when you were in your 30s or your 40s, you would only end up with like $200,000, $300,000. So, taking this seriously is extremely important. So let's go back to the questions and see what else we have here. With a silver nisab, more people will pay zakat, but doesn't that necessarily mean? It doesn't that necessarily imply that less people will receive zakat because less people will be considered poor? No, because we are not considering having nisab to be a preventative of receiving zakat. And you can go back to yesterday's lecture about differing perspectives about what prevents a person from receiving zakat. Is it their inability to live with sufficiency, or is it their owning of nisab? And the stronger opinion seems to be it is the issue of sufficiency based upon the hadith of Qabisa and others. But that is a great question. How much maximum zakat can be given to a person or a family? Can it be more than the nisab amount? Yes, you can give as much as you want to a family if they are eligible for zakat in that year. And how to dispose of interest earned on money market account or money market fund in a 401k, assuming it's not eligible for qualified distributions. Well, the money that you purify, whether it's in your 401k, IRA, brokerage account, ESA, HSA, it does not have to come from that same account. So if I have, let's say $50 of interest income that I've been earning on my brokerage account, but I have $50 freestanding cash at home, then I just give the cash away with the intention of paying that down, and I've met my obligation of purifying my wealth. I'm not rewarded for sadaqah when I give away interest because interest is haram, but I have fulfilled my duty, and that is to get rid of the interest. Okay. Jam. Sorry, I can't. You have too many jams in your name. Please share this live afterwards as a reel or a post. The problem with doing that on Instagram is that any reel, which is like an hour or more, which these are, it usually does not post well and it gets messed up. So I have not been saving them on Instagram, but everything is saved to a YouTube playlist. And you can find that YouTube playlist on my channel, which is youtube.com/Joe Bradford. All right, everybody. 6:30. I gotta go. Jazakumullah khairan. We'll see you. Well, today is what, Thursday? Yeah. So last 10 nights are wrapping up. May Allah bless each and every one of you to be from amongst those who are free from the hellfire and granted Laylatul Qadr. Given that Eid may be Wednesday, I might actually do this session on Monday and Tuesday. But I'll just look out on my socials and I'll announce it, inshallah ta'ala. All right, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.